There's one player I think we need to discuss when looking at the issues in the Indian batting lineup in the ongoing Border Gavaskar Trophy, and that's Shubman Gill. He's got all the talent in the world, and we've seen it in dribs and drabs throughout his career, but he's never got big runs outside of Asia. So let's have a look at the numbers. Away from home, Shubman Gill averages 28.46, and that includes 4 test matches in West Indies and Bangladesh with 100. This is in contrast to him averaging 42 at home, so it is clear there is some sort of issue. I think one thing we can see with Shubman Gill is there is a level of aesthetic bias with how he's viewed by pundits and fans alike. Because he looks so effortless and can play some outrageous shots, people just assume he should be able to adapt his game to any situation and score runs. This isn't too dissimilar to a young Rohit Sharma. For a long time it was felt he never lived up to his potential in Test cricket and that he might never do. It was only really on his tour of England in 2021 where we saw a new side of him, and he started to play with soft hands and his feet didn't get quite as stuck as they did previously, and he was able to score runs. Whilst technically Rohit and Shubman set up differently, there is definitely a direct comparison with how they are perceived, as both ooze class and were given longer rope than many other players just because of the aesthetic bias I mentioned earlier. However, there will come a time where Gill's numbers just aren't good enough and they'll have to move on with him. It's just whether he can find solutions to his game before this happens. So what are Shubman Gill's issues? I think there are 2 main ones with this setup. He gets back and across and sets himself up to play or leave balls, and whilst he does get a good stride in often, he can often play the ball on the up outside of off, which is okay in India, but in SENA, so South Africa, Australia and New Zealand, your judgment of when to play and leave has to be spot on, otherwise you risk nicking off. We saw this versus Stark in Brisbane. However, typically he does get a few of these away just because his hand-eye coordination and his talent are so good. It's just whether he can do this to get enough runs before they get him. Secondly, Shubman Gill just has unbelievably hard hands outside of off stump. The way he punches the ball back of a length and full outside off just to get a single or maybe a 4 on occasion is what worries me. Whilst there are different methods to be successful, on swinging and seaming pitches, universally the best method seems to be to play the ball late and with soft hands. We've seen KL Rahul have such success on this tour by using that method, and it's something that Shubman Gill seems incapable of doing so far in his career, which is a real issue. It's one of the reasons that you often see him bat so well and suddenly out of nowhere he'll nick a ball off and get out. This can be summed up by his dismissal versus Jimmy Anderson in 2022 in England, where he just pokes at the ball as he tries to jab runs on the offside, and this is where he needs to tighten up his technique and his game so that he can't just be going out like this, and he needs to make the bowlers bowl to him. But whilst technically there are some issues, I do think over time he can learn to control these quirks to his game and improve and become a world-class player. And we saw how rapidly he improved his game versus spin earlier this year in England, when there were big questions over his place in the side. But what can he do specifically short term in this series to get runs in the next 2 matches, which will be crucial for India winning? I think the main thing is his judgment. He's got to know when to play the ball and when to leave the ball, and if he can be really judicious outside off stump, that negates most of the flaws in his game, and once the bowlers bowl to him, then he's a different player and he can really impose himself. It's just weathering those first 30 or 40 balls and tiring out those bowlers much like Pujara did when he was in Australia. Whether he can do this remains to be seen. I'm not the most confident in this, but let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. Do you think Shubman Gill will score runs in the last 2 tests of the series?